All right, we're here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. The date is April 20th, 2021. And today I'm interviewing Maurus Chino of Acoma Pueblo. So today I just have a series of 6 questions, and I'm hoping we can spend a lot of time working through them as we see fit. So, my first question for you, Maris, is so people claim that Pueblo people, for lack of a better term, and I know you have an issue with that term. I know I always identify as Toa to indicate who I am because that's what we call ourselves. I hope someday we can bring that back, right? But people claim that Pueblo people are docile and didn't participate in Red Power or Native resistance movements. But I think your legacy proves them wrong. And what do you have to say about the notion that Pueblo people didn't or don't have like a legacy of political resistance?
First of all, I'd like to introduce myself in my traditional way. Guadzi haupa tu shinome ka aimaishtiwa tagash jami hanustota ushat washtistota etiu. Maurus Chino este Americana Shia, and I'm here to do this interview. I've thought about the question about how we may be perceived as docile, and it really upsets me. And I think that part of that perception may be our own fault, and I think that it has to do with even our social structure as our people here in New Mexico. I hate that word Pueblo. I detest it. I don't know how we can work around it. I think it has to be a joint effort in how we can use a different word to describe the different tribes, the indigenous tribes here in New Mexico. But I hate that word Pueblo because it's a Spanish word that identifies us, and I don't like it at all. So that being said, I think that we can talk about about this word, and yeah, it does bother me because some people think that we may be submissive in our dealings with the outside world, but I think it has to do with our social structure. And that means that what we do as people has to do with the greater good of the people, and so we act in that manner. And it's really rare for people to step outside of that way of thinking. And it's rare for people to act out, especially in public, against even maybe the perceived norms of our own tribes, and we get put down for that. It's hard to do it. And I know that with your own activism, you've encountered that. So it's hard for us to do. But we came to this point as people, as a cohesive people with still our culture and identity intact. And there was a good reason for it, because we acted in that manner. For everyone is for the good of the people. At home, we hear that a lot. We hear that often when people say, if we act as one, things are going to be light. Things are going to be smooth, and so we act in that manner. And it was beneficial for the people, because after how many thousands of years, we're still here. We're still here as Acoma people, as where you're from, where even the Apaches and the Navajos, we're still here. And so it served that good purpose. But dissent is also important too. And if we didn't resist, if we didn't step out those boundaries, we would not have continued as we are today as a cohesive people. We are not conquered. I've seen conquered people. When I went down to Mexico in 2004, we went down to help the Zapatistas celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the uprising in Chiapas. We went through many mountain villages, and in the towns, I saw conquered people whose skin was as brown as ours, but they had lost everything else that made them who they were. But we're still here. And I speak for the indigenous tribes here in New Mexico. And so that was a good thing. But for our own resistance, we see it every day. Because we still are who we are, it was because of the resistance of the people, and that happens every day. And we wouldn't be here without those who fought for us. And so everyone is part of that resistance if you keep your identity.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, I know. I've been told by elders, as long as you get up in the morning, throw your cornmeal, and assert yourself, that shows that we are here, and we still have our relationships with the land. Thank you for that. Are you ready to move on to the next question?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So the next one, oh, sorry, I actually started on the second question I had written. So, can you tell me about when and why you first started getting into political work and movement work?
It was, first of all, I'll say this, and I usually don't speak about this in public. It's not something that I keep secret, but it's something that's a very private part of my life, for my friends and my relatives. At home, everybody knows I'm a recovering alcoholic. I grew up in an alcoholic home. I knew the shame. I knew the sorrow of how it is to grow up under those conditions. And in 1992, there were two things that happened. Up until then, I had tried and failed to get sober. I just couldn't do it. I knew a cycle that was becoming deadlier and deadlier. It was jail, hospitals, and rehab. Jail, hospital, and rehab. It was that cycle that was just beginning to spiral downward. And in 1992, for some reason, I started my life sober. And in that year, I read an article in the newspaper about the statue of Oñate that was going to go up in Alcalde, where Oñate had a home just outside of Española. And this anger rose up inside of me. It was really hard to understand this rage that I say that it came from the generational trauma that we all feel as Indian people here, rose up inside of me. And I felt powerless because I didn't know what to do. I had no connections to other activists. I didn't even know what activism was. I missed all the 70s. when my younger brother, who was part of AIM, and he would go to the different uh, actions that AIM had. My brother Larry, my younger brother Larry, and some of them were even armed confrontations. So I missed all that because at that time I was very heavy into drinking, and that sort of stuff just blew over my head. My brother's gone now, and I miss him. But in 1992, for some reason, that started my my road to recovery. And I read that that newspaper article, and I decided to write a letter. And so I did. I wrote that letter. I wrote the letter to the Secretary of Interior, Manuel Lujan, and I spent days composing it. And I did my best. It wasn't a very good letter. I still have the letter because I Xeroxed it, and it's pretty incoherent. I could see that I was no writer at all. And I received a reply from his office, and they said that we're sorry, there's nothing that we can do because the funds have been appropriated already, so it's going to go up. And I felt that anger again within me. I mean, that we can do what we can to change situations of oppression or racism, but then many times they make no impact at all, or we think they don't make any impact. And I think at that time I could have just said, okay, I failed, I did my best, and I'll move on. But something in me had changed at that time, and I think it had to do with my being sober. I think those two events were intertwined, and they were dependent on each other. One could not go much farther without the other. They fed on each other. And I decided that I would start protesting. I had no idea what I was doing. I had nobody to speak to about it because I had no connections. And I had made a decision to do my first action at the Albuquerque Museum. I don't even know what year that was. I forget. Late 1990s. And so I got a permit. Somebody told me how to do it. And that person was Yolinda Benali, or Yolinda Toledo now, I think. Yolinda Benali Toledo. For some reason, I got in touch with her, or somebody told me to get in touch with her. And she said, okay, what you need to do, you need to get permission. And you need to send out a press release. And I said, well, how do you write a press release? So she gave me examples of her own press releases. And then that's how I did it. And I can remember 3 people who were there in support of me. 4 people. My uncle, Manu Rainbird, he's from Santa Ana, and 2 friends of mine. And that was it. And I can remember at that time being terrified to speak in front of the camera and in front of people. And I was terrified almost to being paralyzed. But even more than that, I knew that taking action was the greater good, no matter how I felt inside. So I would always pray before I did anything. And I spoke to our ancestors, the mothers and fathers who had gone before, who have gone before us. And I told them, I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing this for you. I'm doing this for our people. And so pretty soon, yeah, I became a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more with confidence within myself. But once I did that, then I began to meet more people. I had heard in the AA meeting, and this was said almost in passing because I've never heard it before. And I didn't know, I never knew what I was doing, even in AA. And that person said, Maurus, if you want to start getting sober, just act as if. Act as if you're sober. Act as if you know what you're doing. Because I didn't know. And that has always stuck in my head. And when I started the activism, never knowing that it was going to be a long time theme for me, I never knew that, never planned it that way. I was just acting in the moment. And I started to act as if. And when I started to act as if, I don't know what you call it, divine intervention, God, whatever, the spirits, whatever you want to call them, started to make things happen. And I began to meet other people. I met Yolinda, Gwen Packard, she's Dakota. And she gave me a place to do my meetings, an actual room in an office building. And I met Bob Anderson, who founded the Stop the War Machine organization. And he was a great help. And I met Alan Cooper, who is well known as an activist in the Albuquerque area. Alan and Bob are both Wounded Knee veterans. And so I knew them, I met them, Andres Valdez, who had a group called Vecinos United, and I'm not sure if he still has that group. And Ophelia Rivas from Tohono O'odham Nation in southern Arizona. And oh yeah, I mentioned my name. We became good friends. And all those people, and many more, and Manu Rainbird, all those people came into my life, and they had their own organizations, and they helped me, and I helped them, and so I formed an organization called the Southwest Indigenous Alliance. And we began to protest the events. For me, it was always has been about protesting Oñate and the conquistador monuments, because it's not really so simple as protesting monuments. It has much to do about our relationships with the people in power here in New Mexico. The Spanish and the white people, they have always been in cahoots because we have what they want. We have the natural resources, and we have the land and the water, and they're after those things. And so there's always been that conflict behind the scenes, and I knew that was always the problem. So it wasn't simply protesting the monuments themselves, but my own protests have always been centered around that. And it was then that I began to the more I did, the more people I began to meet. And then I met John Valadez, who was doing a documentary. His documentary was about John Hauser, the sculptor who did the big sculpture of Oñate down in Texas, El Paso, Texas. And he heard about what I was doing, and he asked me if I wanted to be part of the project. So that documentary then turned out to be uh, 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 about John Hauser, but also about my protests against the statue. Mm-hmm. So it was something that sort of grew on its own, mm-hmm. And I couldn't have done it without those people that were there for me. And now that I look back, that was really a golden time, I guess I could say, in Albuquerque during those late 90s and early 2000s. And so much was going on. We had a two-term mayor who is a very racist and terrible human being. I mean, Marty Chavez. Ooh. And we had people like Conchita Lucero and Millie Santillanes, who were part of the Hispanic Cultural Preservation League. Mm-hmm. And it was a thinly disguised racist organization that tried to promote the heroic conquistador history of New Mexico. And so for those years, I mean, it was really some really stressful. But it was really something because it changed my life. Mm-hmm. And I miss those years now that I think about it, but they formed much of my thinking during that time.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I can only imagine. That same organization is still hounding us today.
The Preservation League, Cultural Preservation League?
I believe so. I don't know if they rebranded as the Hispano National Chamber of Commerce or if
they're
different.
Yeah. And I can remember. I mean, I was almost consumed with what was going on at the time, and I had to back off several times because it was affecting my health. Yeah. And it certainly affected my business because I pushed even that aside. Mm. And it hurt how I made a living. So, yeah. But I believed that it had to be done, and I couldn't stop. And neither did I want to stop too, because I would pull back and something would happen, and I said, okay, I mean, we're still in this, and we're still going to do our part. I see now the statues that have come down, and that was our whole focus. And at one point, I was speaking to Manu after the El Paso protest. I'm not sure what year that was. 2000. I'm not sure. The statue was up, and we just felt like we failed. But I said we did what we had to do. Mm-hmm. And now that I see that the statues have come down, and I say to myself, and I've spoken to Manu, I said those things that have happened recently to bring down the statues, they could have never happened without us. Exactly. And I tell Manu, I remember my mom talking she talking to me, and she was a potter. She's gone now. But we were talking about one time about pottery sales, um, and she said, you know, son, I really miss going up to Espanola or Santa Fe. And she said it was such a good market. And she was talking about the Santa Fe Fiesta.
Mm.
And I guess that was open then. That a lot of I've never gone. I want to say I
Good for
never
you.
I've never gone. I never. No, I did go once. I did go once, and this was after after we had talked. I'm sorry, I did go once because she told me. She said there was almost a riot
Oh, wow. What year was that?
when she was selling her work, and I'm not sure. This must have been in the early '70s. And she said there was almost a riot. I mean, they had to call the police. And after that, she never went back to sell at that in Espanola. And so I went one year, and the reason I didn't remember is because I only spent like a minute or two at the plaza.
Yeah.
What I saw was disgusting. As part of the parade, they had a guy dressed as a conquistador, and he had a rope, and it was tied around the neck of of one of the Indian actors.
Oh my God.
And man, I mean, I felt sick, and I left, and I never went back. But this was way before I even considered doing any kind of activist work. So
Oh.
those themes were already beginning to work, beginning to work with me. Mm-hmm. And I think about that now. What made me do it? I know the people that I grew up with at Acoma. Many of them are way more outspoken than I am. And I wonder, well, what made me do it when they haven't even gone and done those kinds of things for the people? Mm-hmm. We just don't know. We really don't know. I don't know what made me do it. I've always been an introvert. Mm-hmm. And I chose the life that I lived as a painter because it's a solitary way of making my living. I don't have to speak to anybody. I can go for days. This this COVID lockdown was nothing. It's business as usual for me. I mean, this is the way I live my life. I don't go out and socialize. I mean, I do my work. Yeah. So in that way, what I did was for me extraordinary. But what I say to people, what I say to the younger people, so we need to do it. We need to do it. We need to get into the face of those people who have oppressed us and continue to do it, who continue to look at us as second-rate citizens. And it doesn't matter how you perceive yourself. If you see a need for action, then you have to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you. You can't wait for somebody to do it. Somebody may do it, but you can't wait for them. You have to do it. You have to make that decision. And I think that there will be only a few of us that really make that decision. If you go to any protests in the streets, you see the small number of people who are actually doing it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about just us as Indians, but Spanish people, white people, black people. If there's an action there against the nuclear waste or whatever, there's only going to be about 10, 15 people out there holding signs and walking the streets. So only a few of us are going to be able to do it, but we need to do it. because those who don't do it and who are able to uh, make decisions, they're going to be swayed by us. And I remember way back in the early 2000s, we did a protest to protest uh, the visit of the Duke and Duchess of Albuquerque. They came to, I think this was what they called the Cuatro Centenario, 1990, yeah. And so they were invited to Albuquerque, and we decided to protest. And we got there, um, and there was 15 of us, 15 Indian well, we had Alan Cooper. Alan Cooper's not Indian. So he was the only white person there, and the rest of us Indian people. And when we got there, the place was filled with cops. We counted 45 cops, so we were outnumbered. Um, and but you do those things. You do those things. I mean, you have to do it. You have to do it. And um, I really don't speak of those things as being in the past because we're still here. Mm-hmm. We're still here, and things still need to be done. So I'm not saying that I'm done or it was a nice life. Hell no. I mean, we still have things to do, and so we continue, and we'll do it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, all your words are just so affirming. Um, and it really means a lot to hear this coming, from someone who's been doing this since before I was born. Because, when I started my work, people tried to make it seem like it was so unusual or a first of its kind thing. And I'm like, I know I'm not the first.
No, 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 you're not the first, but you're still part of that uh, very rare minority. When a woman speaks up, such as you do, I mean that's really rare, and I admire that. I I had an aunt. She's gone now. Her name was Aunt Ruth. Her name was Ruth, and she was very outspoken. Even way back in the day, I was just a young person. I can remember her speaking out, and she would speak out at the tribal meetings, which was unusual. Which people said, well, that's really not your place. But she didn't care. She didn't care, and she spoke out anyway. And I know that a lot of people have admired her for doing that, and she's been one of my role models too. So you just know that there are others who may not say anything, but who look to you for guidance and look to you as a role model in yourself, even though you're still young. So yeah, I admire that, and 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 that's what I say to the younger ones. I mean, we need to do something. There are issues at hand here that go much deeper than many of us are willing to talk about, and they're getting more dire too because those issues include issues of resources like land and water rights, and and we're losing many of those.
Thank you so much for that. Was your Aunt Ruth also Chino?
No, no. Her last name was Toribio, and she was married to a Laguna man, and so her name was Paisano, Ruth Paisano. And I don't know if you know Tweety. Uh, yeah, well, that's her daughter. Tweety is much the same as her mom. But yeah, there are those people that who made that decision to try to change things for the good, and it has to be done. So even though we as a people have tried to be cohesive, and maybe it's rare for others to step out, rare for us to step out of the norm and to speak about those things in public, still it has to be done. One of my uncles had told me that dissent is very important in any culture, because it helps the people grow. Otherwise, the people just go and waste at the wayside, and we can't continue anymore. So dissent is important, and we need that as tribal people. And,
Absolutely. Don't mind me. I'm just doing timestamps. Was that your uncle? Which uncle was that?
um, if I had any of my uncles who were role models, uh, they were three brothers: Simon Ortiz, um, and Petuch. Uh,
Petuch is your uncle as well?
Petuch and Simon are brothers.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and then Earl. So there were those three brothers. I grew up with Earl. He was closer to me in age. Simon was already older than me, but then those two have been very inspiring to me in my work. And Simon, I always could ask him for advice in how to word something I was working on, a statement or whatever. But I knew he was his own work in activism, so it was always inspiring too. And then Petuch, when he began his own work, it was always helpful. So yeah, I had those two as role models.
That's wonderful. They're also
Mm.
my role models.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
hoping to talk to them as well for
Oh,
this
okay, yeah,
project.
okay, yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah. And I'm really glad that you're going to speak to Ophelia.
Yeah.
And if there's one woman I admire in this whole activism movement, Ophelia has to be way up there. I mean, I have great admiration for her.
Wow, that's
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah.
This is such awesome history, just putting
Mhm.
all the dots together in my mind.
Mhm.
So I wanted to shift it up a little bit. Speaking of your relationship to Simon Ortiz and
Mhm.
everyone, so I read Roots of Resistance,
You
Roxanne's book,
which one?
Roots of
Oh, okay,
Resistance.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, and that's been foundational to all my research and my work. And I especially appreciated the input that she got from you and Simon on, Pueblo issues and contemporary events. And
Mhm.
something that stood out to me um, was the way she tackled the difficult subject of the relationship between Pueblos and Geniceros. And
Mhm.
today, unfortunately, I and other Native scholars and organizers have been subject to attacks by those claiming
Mhm.
to be part of the quote Genicero Nation,
Mhm.
which is from what I can understand, is a type of movement they're trying to
Mhm.
um, get going. And some even go as far as advocating for the theft of Pueblo land, water, and resources. And some of them even are seeking federal recognition on the
Mhm.
basis of genealogy and DNA tests and being able to track a native ancestor in that way.
Mhm.
And so that portion in the book, it deeply informed my understanding of these tensions throughout history. So can you maybe just speak a little bit to your understanding of these tensions and what you've seen?
Mhm. I never knew what the term or label Genízaro was until just a few years ago. I remember seeing it maybe decades ago and never paid much attention to it. I had no interest. I didn't see it. I didn't see any connection that it had to for Indian people. So only recently have I come across that term and tried to understand what it means. And I read that it comes from the word janissary, which was in reference to conscripted soldiers for the Ottoman Empire, and then Genízaro is the Spanish version of janissary. And so those people who identify as Genízaro are descendants of those Indian allies that came up with Oñate. They came up as mercenaries. And I don't agree with people who say that those people who were born from those descendants in New Mexico, from those descendants of Mexican Indians who intermarried with the Spanish, have created or have created this new race of people, and they're called Genízaros. I don't agree with that one damn bit, not one freaking bit. I don't like it. It's not true. I don't care who says it. I remember even Roxanne had mentioned that, and she had said, well, maybe they're indigenous. I said, I don't give a shit what they call themselves. They're descendants of Indians and Spanish heritage. It doesn't make them a new people. She said that they referred to themselves as the mystic race. Whatever the hell that means, I don't give a shit what that means. I don't care. It's meaningless. It don't mean nothing. Doesn't mean anything. It just means that there are people of mixed race. So even people who have influence, when they say those things, don't believe it. Don't believe it. No one can create a people, a different people. They're only people of mixed race. That's all they are. They are not indigenous. I gave 4 requirements, I guess you could say, that identify the indigenous peoples of the Americas. And some people agree with it. Some people have said that it's not true and whatever. But it describes us as indigenous people. Number 1, they have an indigenous language, a tribal language. They have or had a traditional land base. They had traditional self-governance, and they had recognition from other tribes as indigenous. By that criteria, Genízaros don't fit. Chicanos don't fit. And it's sad too, because I've lost friendships. And I say, because people have said we used to have this old man who was a supporter of the Southwest Indigenous Alliance, come to our meetings. He was already an old man now, and I liked him. His name was Carlos. I don't know his last name. But he was a lieutenant to Reyes Lopez Tijerina. I don't know if you're. Yeah, he was a lieutenant. I mean, so he was in that movement. and he would say to me that they considered themselves indigenous. And I said, no, you're not indigenous. I said, we can be allies. You and I, we can be allies, and we're allies. If you have an issue, I'll fight for you. And later he did have an issue, but I stayed away from it. I mean, it was a stupid issue anyway. He was trying to bring support for dogfighting, saying it was a cultural. And I said no. He wanted me to talk to Acoma about it and give him support. I said, I'll give you the number to the tribal office, and you talk to them. I said, I'll give you a warning. They're gonna hang up on you and call you a nut. But I'm not gonna support that. Anyway, we spoke about it, and I said, no, you're not indigenous. And he said, well, we're in a quandary. And he was talking about the Chicanos, that they were in a quandary. I said, I know, and I feel bad, but that's not going to make me say that I support your bid for indigeneity. And I said, no, it doesn't mean that. They made a choice when they came here to fight Indian people as Indians. At that moment, they gave up their identity as indigenous people. When they accepted, when they were inherited heirs to the Spanish land grant system, they forfeited their claim to indigenousness. They are not indigenous anymore, and we should never, never, never support that. And we should always speak out against it too, because it's not simple pride. Anybody can be proud of their ancestral connection to the Indians. I mean, it's nice. But they're the only people who say that they are a different race because of it. They're the only ones. You don't see people who say they have Cherokee princess as their grandma saying, "Okay, I'm a new Indian. I'm a new tribe here." I mean, you don't see that. They're the only people who do it. And just because they're the only ones who do it doesn't make it right, because it's going to affect issues on so many levels. At the forefront will be issues of land rights and water rights, which it's already affected, and then it affects other issues of grants, educational grants. Who gets a scholarship to do this work or to go to this prestigious school just because they claim to be indigenous? So it affects many things, and I think that we should always speak out against it. And it doesn't matter if that person is influential as a writer, as a politician, and they support the Genízaro bid for indigenousness. That doesn't matter. I mean, we should always speak out against it.
I absolutely agree. Thank you. And I know that in some cases, Genízaros will also say, well, we're the descendants of, slaves who were, either trafficked or, made to do the bidding and work of the Spaniards. And so that's why we deserve recognition. And to that I say, well, that's unfortunate, and we absolutely should be allies, but that still does not make you indigenous.
Yeah. And if they feel so bad, tell them to give back those Spanish land grants. And I tell people, if those Spanish who claim to be Genízaro, and I tell them, if you have a connection to a tribe, if you have Indian blood and you can prove it, go to those people and say, I'm part of your tribe. And then when you do, when you do that, I tell them, then do what they do. Support them, support their cause, go do what they do. If they're dancing for some reason, then you go over there and ask to be part of it. But they can't create their Genisero nation. That's bullshit. They can't do. You can create a club. They can be a Genisero nation club, but they can't be a whole damn race. No, no, I don't believe it.
Thank you for all of this. I just really appreciate your that you're not hesitant to talk about this issue, because I know it's one that, people are iffy about getting into, but I certainly think it's important and is going to have ongoing consequences, like you said.
Mhm.
So we're coming up on the hour. So I would just like to end with one question, one last question, and that is, what advice do you have for young people looking to be involved in this fight for liberation today?
I think that the most important thing is to take that first step. And however small it is, you take that first step. I mean, I worry about it because as I get older, I wonder who's going to continue the work. But I see people, and I was talking to Manu, and I had mentioned you, and I said I'm glad that there are people like Jennifer who are stepping up. And then I see, um, oh gosh, what's her name? She's going to run for Congress. She's from Acoma.
Oh, geez.
Oh
I
God,
know her name's on the
yeah.
tip of my tongue.
Oh my God, Georgine Lewis. And so I see those, I, I see those younger people who are stepping up. But if I had to speak to a young person, I would say that there's something beyond ourselves, and that to work for the people is imperative. I mean, we have to do it, and to be an activist doesn't necessarily mean what we do. We got out in the streets. We put ourselves at risk. It doesn't have to mean that. To be an activist means, okay, I mean, I'm going to do something that's probably in a lot of cases just as scary, and that's saying, how do I ask somebody to help me to participate in this dance? If you don't have aunts and uncles who will show you, then it's hard. Then that's as equally as terrifying. As I mentioned, I grew up in an alcoholic home, and so that kind of guidance wasn't there for me. All my uncles, on my mother's side, father's side, maybe not from my father's, but from my mother's side, and of course, our mother's side is always closest as a matrilineal people. That side of our lineage is closest. All my uncles, they're all alcoholics. I had no guidance. And when I decided that I was going to do that, which means go back to the religion of my people without knowing anything, was terrifying. But I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I have to do it. And I would tell that young person that's as equally as important as making that decision to go out into the streets and oppress the racism and resist the oppression and racism that confronts us every day. And it just takes that small step, however, whatever that step may be. And sometimes doesn't even have to do with courage. It's not really doesn't have to do with courage. It just really just means taking that step, making that commitment to do something. And I think that should be for all of us. I mean, that means everybody, not just the young people, but for everybody. And I tried to do that when that was what I was trying to do with when I would do those morning walks, and hoping that it would inspire somebody to do something. Saying it's just an ordinary damn walk. I'm not saying anything profound, but I'm just saying, look around. When you see something, then something's going to change. Something will change within you. Something will change within me. When that happens, something sets into something in motion. And I want to see that in the young people. And it's disheartening sometimes when I don't see it. But you never know. You never know. Nobody in the world could have predicted I would have taken this path. I admire you so much because I know how our people can be, especially if a woman speaks out. When I first started to speak out, and I would tell the young people too, if you make that decision, you have to make it with all your heart. To say, okay, if my people turn against me, what am I going to do? Well, you can't worry. You can worry about it, but you have to do it anyway, knowing full well that you might find the ridicule and that the people may shun you. And I said to myself, okay, I'm ready to face it. But then enough people told me too that will come up to me and say, thank you, Maurus, for what you've done. You have to do it, and you have to get your mindset to that point where you're going to do it no matter what. It doesn't have to mean laying your life on the line, but it means that with every action that we do, there are going to be consequences. Something's going to happen. And you have to accept it. It gets easier. You never get over, I never did anyway. I never got over that fear. Initial. The night before. You're thinking. What if this happens? How am I going to do this? Where do we go or whatever? But once it's going, you're okay. You get over that initial fear and you take that step. That's the biggest part. I think that's the biggest part. But any little thing that we do makes a difference. Mm-hmm. The work that we did with SWIA, we called it SWIA. The work that we did affected things that came later. We didn't fail. We just set the stage for the ones who really took the things down. And that's the way it should work. Everybody has a part in it. We took it a little farther than what my mother saw. But I'm sure that those people who participated in that almost riot way back in the 70s, took their courage for something that happened before and before and before and before, all the way back to the what they call the revolt of 1680, and even before that, in 1598, when Oñate first came. And that's another thing. I mean, it's our duty to change the narrative. We don't say the 1680 revolt. It was no simple revolt. It was an actual revolution that happened. That revolution, for that short span of 12 years, was the most successful revolution probably the world has ever seen in its complete success in what it tried to do, and that was to dispel the Spanish from this land. We changed history, but we couldn't overcome the tide that was there already. I mean, that was bound to happen no matter what. But we did what we had to do, and we've accomplished something, because by that action, they let us do what we have done for thousands of years. It came about because they banned our religion. And I know I anger my own people. I anger my friends. And I just hope that I don't take it too far when I tell people, how can we pray to the God of the people who slaughtered our own people? And but that's a whole nother issue. But one thing that, and this is like Manu, his desire before he goes is to change the name of Coronado State Monument. Mine would be, okay, let's call ourselves something other than Pueblo. Let's work and find a word that fits everybody, that everybody agrees to. It could be a word, or it could just simply stop using the word Pueblo and say indigenous city-state of Acoma, of San Ildefonso, of Santa Clara, or even changing those names back away from a Spanish name. Those places, your places, had names before a Spanish name. It could mean that. But for me, I mean, that's what it would be. Change the damn word Pueblo.